What if the most powerful remedies for your joints were never invented in a lab, but have been growing in your garden and sitting in your kitchen this whole time? These are not folk superstitions. They are forgotten herbs with named compounds and real clinical research. And today I am walking you through 10 of them. I am Barbara O'Reilly, 43 years an herbalist. That golden resin you saw on the thumbnail is number 6. It targets a completely different inflammation pathway from every painkiller on your pharmacy shelf, and it does not carry their stomach cost. But the one I am saving for last was official medicine in this country for 182 years. And the ruling that scared everyone away targeted a part of the plant you do not even use. Here are 10 forgotten herbs to revive your joints, ranked from remarkable to the one that changed everything. Number 1. Turmeric. The golden root that got reduced to a food coloring. You have it in your kitchen right now, a jar of yellow powder on the spice rack pushed behind the paprika. Most people only reach for it when a recipe calls for color. That is not why this plant spends 9 months underground. A clinical trial in Thailand put curcumin, the compound inside that powder, against ibuprofen in 367 patients with knee osteoarthritis. The curcumin group matched the ibuprofen group on pain and function, with fewer side effects on the stomach. The ancient world already knew. Warriors carried turmeric for wounds, and after exhausting journeys they stirred the ground root into warm milk and drank it before sleep. That drink has a name now. They call it golden milk. I have a book on my shelf, the 1918 U.S. Dispensatory, one of the old drug references I have been studying for decades. Here is what that edition wrote about turmeric. One line, only to impart color to ointments. That was all they had left for a root the ancient world carried into battle. The FDA still classifies it the same way, a spice and coloring, not a medicine. Turmeric never got forgotten. We just forgot what it was for. However, and this is important, if you take blood thinners, especially warfarin, concentrated turmeric supplements can raise your levels dangerously. Culinary amounts in food are a different matter, but high-dose capsules are not something to start without knowing what else you take. Here is the traditional approach. You stir the ground root into warm milk with black pepper because the pepper contains piperine and it multiplies curcumin absorption dramatically. Cook it into a fat, like olive oil or coconut oil, because curcumin is fat-soluble and your body cannot absorb it without one. That golden powder has been sitting on your shelf this whole time, doing nothing, because nobody told you what it was. One quick thing before I continue. You can buy the right plant, use the right amount, and still get nothing from it because of something you do in the last 5 minutes in your own kitchen. Nobody explains that part. I will tell you where I wrote it down at the end of the video. Number 2. Cinnamon. The bark that went from the doctor's bag to the spice rack. There was a time when this spice was prescribed, not sprinkled. In 1898, the King's American Dispensatory praised cinnamon as one of the most prompt and efficient remedies in all of medicine. They used it for cramps, poor circulation, and joints that stiffened in cold weather. Then synthetic drugs arrived, one after another, and the bark that physicians once reached for got pushed to the baking aisle and left there. Here is what most people miss about the science. The compound responsible is cinnamaldehyde, a natural vasodilator that opens blood vessels and draws warm blood towards stiff, inflamed joints. It also blocks the release of arachidonic acid, an inflammatory fatty acid that accumulates around aging joints and drives the pain you feel on a cold morning. The ancient world traded cinnamon at prices above gold, and Greek merchants invented a legend that giant birds built their nests from cinnamon on cliffs nobody could reach. That is how badly they wanted it. Cinnamon never got forgotten. We just forgot it was medicine. Just be aware, There are two kinds on the shelf, and they are not the same. Most grocery store cinnamon is cassia, which contains a compound called coumarin, and regular high-dose use has been linked to liver injury. Ceylon cinnamon has almost no coumarin and is the safer choice for daily use. If the label just says cinnamon, it is almost certainly cassia. You steep a whole cinnamon stick in hot water until the water turns golden, especially on mornings when the stiffness is worst, and stir it with a little honey. It is like having a slow fire working from the inside of the joint outward, warming what the cold locked up. Number 3. Garlic. The bulb that went from battlefield medicine to bread seasoning. Nobody can patent a bulb that grows in a ditch. That is the first thing worth understanding about why garlic is not on your doctor's list. When the Soviet army ran out of antibiotics during the Second World War, they crushed garlic into wounds and the soldiers called it Russian penicillin. By 1944, the active compound allicin had been isolated, but synthetic penicillin had already taken over, and garlic lost its place in medicine entirely. Here is why it matters for your joints. Researchers at King's College London found that women who ate more allium vegetables had significantly lower rates of hip osteoarthritis. The compound responsible, diallyl disulfide, limits the enzymes that break down cartilage in laboratory studies. The ancient world knew what it had. Egyptian pyramid builders received garlic rations daily, and when the supply was cut, they refused to work. Garlic never got forgotten. We just stopped thinking of it as anything more than a seasoning. If you take warfarin or blood thinners, concentrated garlic supplements carry real risk. A compound called ajoane irreversibly inhibits platelet clumping, and garlic ranks among the top 5 herbal products linked to dangerous clotting changes. Garlic in your cooking is generally safe, but high-dose capsules are not the same thing. You crush the clove and let it sit for 10 minutes in open air before cooking, because the crushing releases an enzyme called alliinase that needs time to convert alliin into allicin. Cook it immediately, and you lose what you were after. It has been in your kitchen your entire life, in the garden, in the crisper drawer, and you have been stepping over the medicine to get to the pharmacy. Number 4. Olive oil. The anti-inflammatory hiding in your kitchen since before you were born. Olive oil held a place in the U.S. pharmacopoeia under its pharmaceutical name, Oleum olivae, listed as an emollient, a laxative, and a carrier for other drugs. When mineral oil and synthetic preparations arrived, it got displaced from the pharmacy shelf. For decades it sat in the cooking aisle without anyone knowing it contained a compound that works the same way ibuprofen does. Here is what makes this remarkable. In 2005, a researcher at the Monell Chemical Senses Center in Philadelphia noticed that extra virgin olive oil leaves the same sharp sting at the back of the throat that swallowing ibuprofen does. That observation led to the discovery of oleocanthal, a compound that inhibits the same inflammatory enzymes through the same pathway. The finding was published in Nature, a natural ibuprofen, hiding in a bottle of cooking oil. The ancient world built civilizations around this tree. Olympic athletes rubbed olive oil over their joints before competition, and the trees themselves live for hundreds of years, still bearing fruit. Olive oil never got forgotten. We just forgot it was anything more than a salad dressing. Only extra virgin olive oil contains oleocanthal in meaningful amounts, because the refining process that produces light olive oil strips out the compound that matters. Store it in dark glass away from heat and use it raw or at low temperatures. You warm the oil gently in your hands and massage it directly into stiff joints each evening, working it into the skin around the knees, the wrists, wherever the ache settles. Think of it as the prescription that has been sitting next to your stove for years, waiting for you to use it. Number 5. Coriander seed. 160 years official, then erased to a seasoning. This is the plant most people know as cilantro. The seed it produces after the flowers bolt was listed in the very first United States Pharmacopoeia in 1820, alongside 217 other official drugs. It stayed for 160 consecutive years, recognized as a stimulant, an aromatic, and a carminative. In 1980, it was removed. Same seed, same compounds, and one day it was medicine, and the next it was a spice. Here is what makes this one sting. The British Pharmacopoeia carried a line about this plant that tells you everything. Same shelf as the turmeric book, same kind of page. Chiefly used to disguise unpleasant medicine. In the ancient world, soldiers returning from long campaigns used coriander decoctions for swollen legs, and Hippocrates had prescribed it centuries before that. The key compound is linalool, and in animal studies, it produced dose-dependent inhibition of joint swelling across 2 different models of induced arthritis. The seed also acts as a mild diuretic, which helps the body clear the excess fluid that pools around inflamed joints. Coriander never got forgotten, but we did forget it was ever anything more than a garnish. If you take prescribed diuretics, regular coriander tea can add to that effect. And if you take diabetes medication, the seed may lower blood sugar further. You boil the dried seeds in water until the liquid reduces, strain it, and drink it warm. The cooled liquid can also be soaked into a cloth and laid over a swollen joint. 160 years on the official list, and now it sits in a jar on the spice rack, waiting for someone to remember what the pharmacopoeia already proved. If you are starting to see the pattern here, if you are realizing that the same books that listed these as medicine quietly stopped listing them, hit that like button right now. Subscribe if you have not already. It helps this video reach the next person searching for the same answers. We are just getting to the ones that surprised me most. Number 6. Frankincense, the resin that healed itself first. This is the one I mentioned at the beginning, the one that works on a pathway your pain pills do not even touch. A boswellia tree grows on bare rock in extreme heat. Score the bark, and it bleeds a milky sap that hardens into golden tears. The ancient world traded it alongside gold. That same 1918 US dispensatory on my shelf has a page on frankincense, now very seldom used internally. Same book, same kind of dismissal. And then in 2010, Indian frankincense was quietly readmitted to the US Pharmacopoeia, gone from the record so long it had to be added back. Here is the word that matters. The compounds in that resin, boswellic acids, inhibit an enzyme called 5-lipoxygenase. That enzyme controls a completely different inflammation pathway from the one targeted by aspirin, ibuprofen, or any painkiller you have taken. Every one of those pills carries the same risk of stomach ulcers and kidney damage. Frankincense works on the other pathway, and it does not carry that cost. A meta-analysis of 7 trials covering 545 patients found significant reduction in pain and stiffness compared to placebo. Frankincense did get forgotten. It got reduced to church incense and a line in the Christmas story, while the resin sat in the desert with more clinical evidence than most things on the pharmacy shelf. If you take anticoagulants, frankincense may thin the blood further, so proceed carefully. And the essential oil should always be diluted in a carrier oil before it touches your skin. You dilute it in olive oil or almond oil, warm it between your hands, and work it into the joints. People have been doing this for as long as frankincense has had a name. Think of it as the tree that bled so yours would not have to. Number 7. Myrrh, bitter tears that ease the body's own. Its ancient partner, from the same desert, the same wounded tree biology. I will not retell the story because frankincense already carried it. The FDA currently classifies myrrh as not generally recognized as safe and effective for oral health care. the same kind of ruling that follows half the plants on this list. Here is what makes myrrh different from everything else here. The active compounds, a class called furanoscytopenoids, appear to work on opioid pain pathways, and in animal studies that analgesic effect was completely blocked by naloxone, the drug used to reverse opioid overdoses. That tells researchers the pain relief is running through the same receptors your prescription painkillers use, except this comes from a tree. And when you combine myrrh with frankincense, the two resins together reduce inflammation beyond what either achieves alone. That pairing is not a modern invention, it is thousands of years old. Myrrh got forgotten alongside its partner, filed under incense and ceremony, while the compounds inside it went on proving themselves to anyone who bothered to look. Myrrh oil should always be diluted before it touches skin, and the same blood-thinning caution that applies to frankincense applies here. You work the diluted oil into aching joints the same way people have been doing it since the ancient world first tapped these trees and collected what fell. That is the desert's quiet answer to everything on the pharmacy shelf. Number 8. Mustard seed. A seed small enough to lose, strong enough to warm a knee. Your grandmother may have known this one, not the yellow bottle in the refrigerator, but the plaster. A paste made from ground seed, spread between layers of cloth and laid over a swollen knee. The warmth that came through was deep enough to feel in the bone. Civil War field medics used mustard when nothing else was available, and by the 1870s, pharmacies sold pre-made plasters right next to aspirin. Then synthetic counter-irritants arrived, then oral painkillers, then prescription patches, and the mustard plaster disappeared from medicine and from memory. Here is how it works. When you crush the seed and add water, an enzyme called myrosinase converts sinegrin into allyl isothiocyanate. That compound draws blood to the surface and floods the joint with warmth. The sensation triggers receptors that override the deeper ache underneath. In 2024, a clinical study put mustard plasters on elderly patients with knee osteoarthritis and measured a 40-point improvement on a 100-point pain scale after 1 week. The prescription patch on the pharmacy shelf costs $30. The seed costs pennies. Mustard never got forgotten as a condiment. The plaster did, and the generation that knew how to make one is almost gone. Here is the problem, and I need you to hear this. Mustard generates real heat, and it can burn you. Never place the paste directly against skin. Always use a cloth barrier and take it off after 10 to 15 minutes at most. Older skin is thinner and burns faster. You grind the seeds to powder, mix the powder with flour and warm water to make a paste, spread it between 2 layers of cloth, and lay it over the joint. Your grandmother's hands knew exactly when to take it off. That knowledge is 1 generation away from being lost. Number 9. Hyssop, the cleansing herb that grows on stone walls. Most people have never heard the name, and that is part of the story. Hyssop was listed in the British Herbal Pharmacopoeia with recognized therapeutic uses, a valued herb across centuries of European medicine for circulation, digestion, and respiratory illness. Then synthetic expectorants arrived, and hyssop was reclassified from a medicinal herb to an ornamental. The plant people grow because the blue-purple flower spikes look pretty against a wall. What it does for joints is quieter than the rest of this list, but no less real. The plant contains D-limonene and flavonoids that support the lymphatic system, the body's drainage network for waste and excess fluid. Around an inflamed joint, that fluid is what creates the swelling, the stiffness, the pressure that makes it hard to sleep. Hyssop helps the body move it out. Travelers in the ancient world carried hyssop to purify water, and across southern Europe, people added it to baths for aching bodies. Hyssop got forgotten. It got pushed to the edge of the garden where nobody asks what it does anymore. Here is what you need to know about this plant, and it matters more than any other warning on this list. The essential oil of hyssop contains a compound called pinocamphone that acts on the brain as a convulsant. It has triggered seizures in humans. The dried herb steeped as tea is a completely different preparation with far lower exposure to that compound, but the essential oil should never be taken internally. Anyone with a history of seizures should avoid hyssop entirely. You steep the dried leaves in hot water, wring a cloth through it while still warm, and press it over a swollen joint. It is like having a quiet crew working beneath the surface, clearing out what does not belong, making room for the joint to move the way it used to. Number 10. Aloe vera, the one I saved for last. You probably have one on your windowsill right now. A quiet green plant that everybody owns and nobody thinks twice about. You break off a leaf when you burn yourself, and that is where it ends for most people. But here is the part nobody told you. That plant was official medicine in this country for 182 years. It entered the United States Pharmacopoeia in 1820, and by the early 1900s, more than 27 different aloe preparations were in popular use across America. The ancient Egyptians called it the plant of immortality. Alexander the Great captured an island to secure his army's aloe supply. Then, on May 9, 2002, the FDA published a final rule. Aloe latex was declared not generally recognized as safe and effective for over-the-counter laxatives. By November of that year, roughly 15 products had been pulled from shelves, and the word spread that aloe was not safe. Here is what most people do not know about that ruling. The FDA was talking about the latex, the thin yellow layer that sits just beneath the skin of the leaf, which contains a compound called aloin, a potent irritant laxative. They were not talking about the gel. The clear gel you scoop from the center of the leaf was never targeted, never restricted, and contains an entirely different set of compounds. The gel carries an enzyme called bradykinase that breaks down one of the body's inflammatory triggers right at the site of the swelling. A polysaccharide called acemannan supports immune function and promotes connective tissue repair. Over 75 active compounds in total, and the gel inhibits the same inflammatory pathway that aspirin targets. You cut the leaf lengthwise, let the yellow latex drain away completely, scoop out the clear gel, and apply it cool to the joint. Here is why the latex distinction matters for your safety. If you cut a fresh leaf and use it without draining, you get the latex and the gel together, and the latex is the part the FDA ruled against. Drain it first, always. If you buy aloe commercially, confirm the manufacturer removed the latex. And if you take diabetes medications or diuretics, aloe taken internally may strengthen those effects. 182 years on the official list. One ruling about the wrong part of the plant, and everyone thought the whole thing was dangerous. That aloe has been sitting on your windowsill this entire time, growing in a pot you water once a week, holding 75 compounds nobody ever mentioned, waiting for you. 10 plants, 10 roots and seeds and resins and leaves, most of them sitting in your kitchen or growing in your garden right now. The people who used these plants were not primitive. They were paying attention. They watched what happened when you laid a mustard cloth over a swollen knee. They watched what happened when you rubbed warm oil into stiff joints every evening. They watched, and they wrote it down, and then we put their books away. My grandmother came over from County Clare with a remedy for every ache and a patch of herbs by the back door, and the only thing she asked was that somebody remember. I have been writing it down for 43 years now, 60 notebooks, and the old books on my shelf keep telling me the same thing the notebooks do. These were never superstitions. They were observations tested across generations, and modern science keeps arriving at the same conclusions, decades late. One last thing before you go, because knowing all of this and doing nothing with it is just entertainment. Quality matters with these plants more than most people realize. The difference between a wild-crafted herb dried carefully on a rack and the irradiated powder in a grocery store shaker is the difference between medicine and decoration. One has the compounds, the other has the name on the label. Everything I trust, every source I actually buy from, is linked in the description. The Dooryard Almanac is there too, if you want the long version. Now do something for me. Tell me which one got you. Are you team golden milk? Team grandmother's mustard plaster? Team the aloe vera that has been sitting on your windowsill this entire time? Tell me in the comments. I read every one of them, and a comment from you pushes this video in front of the next person who needs it. Someone lying awake wondering whether there is something better than the pills their doctor keeps refilling. You would be doing that for a stranger. Subscribe if this was worth your time. New one every day. Then go find one plant from this list, just one, and get the real version this week. Not the grocery store imitation, the real thing. Walk outside and look at what is already growing 10 steps from your door. That is how it starts.